Hello everyone, it's Micah. I think I'm going to make this a quick video. I think that will be my refrain from now on, regardless of whether it's 5 minutes or 35 minutes. But I do want to get out of here and have dinner. It is December 11th, 2024, which is, I'm finding, going to be a cogent thing for me to do to actually timestamp these videos verbally, because I neglected to upload yesterday's video, so they're not always going to upload on the same day that I make them. But again, this is all for me and my benefit, so ultimately it doesn't matter. But this is what I believe to be episode 6. I think it's episode 6. Don't hold me to that. Last night, after I made yesterday's video, I went home and had reasonably ambitious intentions, but all I ended up doing was a lot of pseudo baking. I'm prepping for a bake-off at work next week, and I wanted to try to do something cool and innovative that I haven't done before, made up of a bunch of stuff that I've not really done before. I wanted to make a pecan pie, but I wanted to emulate something that I threw together right after Thanksgiving. Someone had brought over brownies, someone had brought over, and I had bought some we had some store-bought pecan pie, and I had some whipped cream. I told this story last night, didn't I? Anyway, I wanted to make that into a composed dessert. So I tried making brownie crusts, which I extracted from the fridge last night, and I realized if I am going to do this, they're going to have to be in cupcake holders if I'm going to do anything like that. And then I made pecan pie filling to fill the brownie crust, but what I'm finding is that it's going to be exceedingly difficult for me to have edges like walls for the pie crust, for the brownie pie crust. But at any rate, I made the filling, and then I made a meringue to go on top. I didn't assemble any of it. I think I may do that tonight. But cooking is one of my 7 pillars that I'm going back and forth among during the course of the week. It's actually my Sunday thing to do is cooking. But the one thing that I'm again trying to do is be flexible and just sort of whatever speaks to me or out of expediency needs to be done, or feels like it's the right time for it to be done. I can skip ahead and do that. So I knew I needed to do some more experimentation there, so that's what I did last night. Last night was my literature night, and I don't really know what I'm going to do with that. I may just watch some more videos, try to find some higher level courses on literature. I don't just want to start reading a work of great literature and then be saddled with that and, without thinking through how I want to approach this. But I also don't want to overthink it, which is another one of the things that I'm trying not to do with this effort I launched at the beginning of the month. We'll see how that goes. Since I deferred literature last night, I will look at literature tonight. I may end up buying an ebook so I can get started reading something, just to, start doing that. Parallel to that, the thing that I'm trying to do during my mornings while I'm working is listening to audiobooks of classic literature, since I found the podcast on Audible. And what I've started listening to last week at work and continue today, this is my 3rd day trying to get through this, is the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. But the audiobook kind of went off the rails today. My cat has strange eating habits, and he's like right here, but that's better than him being up here and like distracting me. Well, he's distracting me anyway, so makes no difference. He's always distracting me. So what was I saying? But yeah, like I said, the audiobook went off the rails today. I think I may be able to finish it. It's a relatively short book, so I only have 2 hours left, but I was really starting to get annoyed because every chapter was a different narrator, and most of the narrators in this audiobook were like amateurs. Like, it started off kind of strong, but there was one chapter today that was read by somebody that I honestly could have done a better job than this individual. It made me wonder. Brief anecdote: back in high school for volunteer work, I decided to read magazines over, I guess it was the public radio station. It didn't occur to me how cool that was that I was doing that. I mean, I guess it did, but it's like, it just thinking back on it, I'm like, wow, that was a really cool thing that I was doing. I would read current magazines it was, ostensibly for the blind over public radio. And I would just go in and record a 1 hour session and, log in what I did. So I guess no one would duplicate it. And then at some point they would have it read over the air, or have it available some kind of way for loan if there was like a library type system. I don't really remember, but I think it was for actual broadcast, which is kind of cool now that I think about it, although there were probably 8 people listening. But this made me wonder today when I was listening to these obviously amateur narrators. It made me wonder, like, the reason why this podcast series is free, is it because they culled some of these from these types of setups where people were volunteering and reading for the blind? Because there's no reason I can think of why they would have 6 or 7 different people reading this very short book. And some of them obviously weren't. Like the one guy today was terrible. Like, he mispronounced the word amicably. I can, a professional narrator and or producer of audiobooks would not tolerate a mispronounced word in any way, but a relatively intelligent audiobook narrator might occasionally botch a word because of regional variations, or just, like not being in the moment, not being sort of like I'm being now, sort of stammering and not really invested in, people make mistakes. That's really the short version of that, and that could happen. But I don't think that amicably is one of those words that a person who's filling this type of position should botch. At any rate, it was so distracting. I am getting some information and some, like, I especially found it interesting to talk about the book itself and not the audiobook narration. It was so interesting to me that Benjamin Franklin went about trying to perfect himself by listing out, was it 11 or 13 different ways in which he could make sure he could track his progress to be a good, moral, upstanding human being. And he was practice each of those things one thing at a time until he got really good at them all. But ultimately what he realized is that you can't really systematize human behavior that way. He just, he decided he was going to live with his flaws and just do the best he could. But he didn't regret making the effort. And the way he compartmentalized and did things really reminded me of myself and the way I try to do those types of things and have throughout my life, kind of tried to organize my way into being this superior version of myself. And so that I found really interesting. But for the most part, I was so distracted by the terrible narration that I'm thinking about giving up the audiobook. I only have 2 more hours to go out of fewer than 8 hours in the audiobook. But I think what I'm going to need to do is actually just sit down and read the book, because I've lost so many details because of the narration is either bad or distracting in some way. So I did that. This afternoon, I've continued listening to the discography of The Dream. Yesterday, I listened to his first 2 albums, the first of which, his debut album from 2007, I think it was, Love Hate, is one of my very favorite albums, but I hadn't listened to it in a long time. But I hadn't, I called myself a fan of his after that album came out, but I never followed up and bought or listened to his other albums. So yesterday I listened to that album plus his second album, Love versus Money. And the takeaway I had was that he really seemed to be leaning into the tropes the audio tropes, the various cadences and arrangements and effects. He leaned further into those on his second album. Like I guess he considered it his trademark. And today I listened to his third and fourth album, and I'm very happy to report that I see a real progression. His third album, again, I think he sort of saw it as a trilogy because they all start with love. The third album was called Love King, and it was really good. I enjoyed it. And then his fourth album was Terius Nash, which was, of course, his given name, Terius Nash, 1977, which, without researching it, I think may be his birth year. And it was a much moodier, darker textured album for sure, but it still had some callbacks to it had a Nikki Part 2 going back to the first album. I found it really very interesting to see him stripped of a lot of his gimmicks that he used on the first three albums, and he actually has a very emo goth kind of macabre tale weaved in there. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but and again, since I'm not taking notes while I'm listening, I'm really just trying to get the listening in. I'm not trying to overthink things. I don't have a lot of really good notes, but there were some real standout moments on both records, and I do see him evolving away from the gimmicks that he used, or I call them gimmicks, but the tropes that he used on his first, especially on his first album. And by the fourth album, which was released in 2012, he'd really, he only did clever callbacks to those prior tropes as opposed to full-on recycling them. So I'm looking forward to seeing even more growth. I've still got a long way to go. I've still got 4 more albums that the last of which came out in 2020, I believe, and then 2 mixtapes that are fairly short, like 20 minutes long. So if counting EPs, that's like 6 albums for me to listen to. So it may be another day or two, but I am making progress with that. And I think the next artist I'm going to do is another one of my favorite artists from the aughts that I kind of didn't fully get a chance to revisit at the time, even though I called him one of my favorite artists, and that would be Neo. One of his songs came up on Apple Music after one of the Dream albums I was listening to ended, and it occurred to me, okay, yeah, that this would be the logical next step to take, because right now it's almost like if I were to make it as less morbid as least morbid, for this to come across as, I can't even construct this sentence. I don't want it to be too morbid, put it that way. So it comes off as not quite so morbid. Let's just say I became deaf tomorrow and couldn't listen to any more music. Like, what would I be mad that I never listened to? So I'm trying to kind of take that approach, an urgency-based approach to what I listen to. And that's why I'm going with artists that I know I like, that I say I'm a fan of, but haven't listened to, all of their catalog. So next is going to be Neo, but I am enjoying this, and Dream's music is really intense. Like, he produces the heck and gets the absolute most brilliant sound out of his albums. I don't know what you have to do to get. I mean, he's using synths and drum machines, and you would think that would automatically, make your music sound like really shiny and polished and so forth. But there's tons of electronic music out there that just, doesn't have that shine to it like his music does. He's there's something really special going on with this guy. So I am looking forward to the rest of his discography. And that's all I've got. That's all I've been able to do tonight. I'm going to see what I can do with literature, and tomorrow I'm going to try to finish off Ben Franklin and get significantly further with Mr. Nash, my fellow ATL resident. I'm not going to use, I did say ATL, but I was about to say I'm not going to use a cutesy name for the city, but ATL is in and of itself one of those nicknames. But that's all I'm going to talk about for now, and we'll see what I can get done before my next video, which hopefully I will get around to tomorrow. Until then.